Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I bring either good or bad news, depending on who you are. A lot of people sometimes get jealous, envious of other characters' preferential treatment, and this is definitely one of those cases. With the new V3, we have gotten what is, in my opinion, the largest buff a V3 has ever given a character in the history of the game, and the receiver of this buff is quite obviously Silverwolf, right? So let's get straight into it. To start us off with, her multipliers have basically been increased almost completely across the board. I'm not going to go through every multiplier. However, just know on average, I'd say her multipliers are probably like 30% stronger across the board, maybe more, right? Now, she has less attack to scale off of for these multipliers. However, we'll get into it a little bit why that doesn't matter all that much. Just know she got massive multiplier nerfs across a bajillion things that I don't want to go through, right? One thing to mention is her ultimate. This is going to be pretty big. Her ultimate requires 80 hidden ranking points in the old version. Hidden ranking has now been name changed to MMR, right? So in the new version, she actually only needs 60 of these points. So only 60 points to be able to enter her ultimate, which is a lot more convenient in comparison to the old 80, and makes it much more doable to just instantly enter her ultimate the second the battle starts. For example, if you have an E1 Yao Guang, you'd literally instantly be able to do a Silverwolf ultimate the second Yao Guang's Aha instant goes off, because Yao Guang's Aha instant will give 40 points, right? So incredibly nice. And then on top of this, her new ult increases damage dealt during enhanced BA by 15% of the original damage, stackable up to 2 times. I believe this isn't damage bonus. This is like a straight up original multiplier increase kinda. So just 30% more damage. Pretty cool, right? Next, we move on to her skill. So her skill is now gain 5 punchline points and deal imaginary damage equal to 160% of Silverwolf. And then we go into the ultimate, God Mode On, which used to be called God Mode Activate. With the new version of the ultimate, there has been a massive buff to those boxes. If you guys would remember in the earlier versions, if someone consumes skill points after Silverwolf used up a turn in her ultimate, she would be able to summon like boxes and attacks that did different things against the enemies, which was pretty nice, right? It gave Sparksy a bit more value on the team. This has now been changed to go from a 34% multiplier to a 90% multiplier, right? So a nearly 3x multiplier increase on these boxes, which is really cool. Now, these boxes have also gotten a name change, but like as I've mentioned earlier, the name changes, don't mind them too much. You're going to see them a lot here. However, they're still the same thing that they used to be. Next, we have a change to her talent for her enhanced state. In the old version, she became immune to CC debuffs and her crit damage increased by 30%. However, this became a lot better in my opinion in the new version for balancing relics, right? Basically, each point of hidden MMR increases crit rate by 0.30%, and after crit rate increases to 100%, each remaining point will automatically switch for you and convert into crit damage instead, to make sure that you don't overcap on crit rate. This makes building relics on her significantly easier in comparison to before, right? You don't need to work around this entire thing. It'll automatically convert for you, and it gives you the equal amount of crit value no matter what. Next, we move on to her Elation skill. One part of her old Elation skill, the base one outside of ultimate, gave 20 points towards her ult. The new one gives 15. Now in reality, this means there's zero difference between the two, since her ultimate cost got reduced by 25%, meaning these things are equal and basically the same. The big change, in my opinion, is in her ultimate's Elation skill, which will massively help her in lower target scenarios. The older version was that it was an AoE attack that dealt 200% imaginary Elation damage. The new version is actually bounce damage, similar to Cassie's Exploding Dragon. It'll deal 6 instances of damage, with each dealing 90% imaginary Elation damage to a random enemy. Then it'll reset the fixed chance to trigger the loot box, which is just the boxes we were talking about earlier, which someone on the team can consume skill points for and activate it, right? So really good change in my opinion. Massively helps in lower target scenarios. Once again, this is very much so similar to Cassie, where even though a majority of her kit is AoE, she has one attack, which is Bounce, the Exploding Dragon, which helps a lot against lower target, enemies. This is very nice, and I appreciate this change. For example, against one target, you'd be able to get off significantly more damage as compared to before. Before, if you're going against one target, there's only a 200% multiplier. With the new one, there is a 540% damage multiplier against that single target. Massive, right? You can just allow Sparksy to mainly take care of most of the AoE stuff, I'd assume, on her premium team, so the bounce matters more, right? At least in my opinion. Next, we go into the traces. Her old trace used to be attack conversion for increasing her elation. The new one is actually speed. So they're making it so that you build speed on her, because obviously something a lot of people have been complaining about when it comes to Silverwolf's performance against endgame mode is that she just doesn't feel fast enough to justify the 3 enhanced basic attack ultimate like Rappa, and it felt kind of clunky, right? It just took too long for her to get her turns. So they're clearly trying to fix this and make it so that she scales off speed more. So the new trace is that when speed is 150 or higher, increase this unit's elation by 30%. For every 1 speed exceeded, increase this unit's elation by 2%, up to a max of 100 excess speed. So this also increases some vertical investments on the Elation teammates. E1 Huohuo with her speed buff is more valuable for Silverwolf now. What's it called? Yao Guang's E2 has now gained even more value because Yao Guang's E2 is a speed buff and Elation buff, stuff like that, right? And then the other Elation talent is just, a change to the name and nothing else, really. Her trace, she did get 9 speed in her traces, replaced by crit damage increase, and that's it, right? Now, let's go into the Eidolons. A lot of people were talking about how Silverwolf's earlier Eidolons were underwhelming, and it does seem like they have listened, right? So if we go over here, her old E1 was that whenever the box was triggered, that we were talking about earlier, that can be triggered with skill point usage, it would additionally provide 2 punchlines and increase the elation of damage dealt by it by 200%. Pretty underwhelming E1 because these boxes used to have a pretty low multiplier. The only thing that really mattered was the punchline here. However, these boxes do not occur frequently enough to justify it really being worth pulling, right? However, in the new E1, during enhanced BA, damage taken by enemy targets increases by 20%. Already off to a significantly better E1. For those who don't know, whenever HSR uses this wording, it just means vulnerability. So on the Elation teams, where you don't have anybody giving you a vulnerability, tourist, Yao Guang does have vulnerability on her Elation skill. My bad, I almost forgot about that shit. Chill on me. I haven't, made any videos or anything in like the last week, right? But vulnerability isn't common, right? So because of this, it's still highly valuable of an E1, 20% more vulnerability on enemies. However, not only this, she will retain 20% of her ult points after finishing her ultimate, which is another really nice buff. Lowers the downtime on getting into her ultimate. You could possibly save 20 or maybe even 30 ult points, and then you do a Yao Guang ult, and then you're instantly back in. Feels amazing, feels smooth, right? And then next we have the E2. Now, we saw this coming. The new E2 basically makes it so that any buffs on her will automatically last 1 turn longer, which is pretty cool. However, the important part is whenever she hits 120 of her ult points, she'll actually gain an extra turn, right? And regain 1 use of her enhanced BA. So the new E2 for Silverwolf allows it and makes it so that you're able to get extra turns significantly more frequently in comparison to before and at E0. So this combined with the fact that she's able to retain some of her old points from E1, synergizing with this E2, and of course Yao Guang's very high punchline gen and Sparksy's punchline gen for Silverwolf, this just is a massive buff, and this E2 is significantly stronger for her, right? So that is everything I want to cover for Silverwolf in this video. TLDR, massive buff towards the box damage that can be triggered by skill point usage, massive buff to speed and turns to make sure that she goes a lot faster, massive buff to multipliers all around, in my opinion around 30%, insane buffs to her earlier Eidolons, and I mean it's just insane, right? This is easily once again the probably biggest V3 buff I've ever seen in my life for a character in HSR history. I can't wait for some gameplays to come out and see how it ends up going. I don't know if I'll make a video on Evanescea, maybe I will, but TLDR, Evanescea's versatility on non-Elation teams, I believe got significantly nerfed, while her Elation team just kind of stayed the same for the most part, I think. So yeah, that's about it. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you all have a great night. Peace out.